Perfect.
Hello and welcome to the Animo Wine Co podcast. I'm David Clarke and today is our annual SONA, our State of the Nation address, where we take a step back and look at where South African wine really stands right now. I'm joined by Christian Eedes of winemag.co.za, and together we unpack the bigger picture, how producers are navigating a tougher market, where quality is rising, which regions are finding their voice, and what feels genuinely exciting versus what might be a little bit overhyped. It's a candid look at the momentum, the pressure points, and the opportunities shaping the Cape wine scene at the moment. But before we dive in, just a quick mention. If you enjoy discovering great wine without the guesswork, please have a look at the Animo Wine Club. We create a selection of wines we genuinely believe in, delivered to your door, along with proper notes and context, so you understand what's in your glass and why that matters. Members also receive free delivery and 10% off all of our ticketed events. You can find all the details at exanimo.co.za/wineclub. That's exanimo, exanimo.co.za/wineclub. All right, let's get into it with Christian.
Today we're joined by Christian Eedes of winemag.co.za, critic, commentator, and one of the sharpest palates in the country. Christian spends his life tasting and writing about where SA wine is heading, and today we dig into style, quality, and what's exciting in the glass right now. Welcome, Christian.
Well, thanks, David. Welcome to you. Thanks for doing this again.
No worries. It's been a few years.
It has been.
Did we do one last year? I think we did. Yeah, we did.
We did. It must be.
There was one year we missed, but I can't remember which year it was.
Probably COVID related.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe COVID started the whole thing, as with a lot of these things. But that's all right. Just a question without notice, or a little bit of notice. When you taste SA right now, what does it say about where we are as an industry?
So it seems to me we're in something of a state of ferment. Excuse the pun.
Sorry.
No, in the sense that the quality has never been better, but the direction forward, as ever, seems perplexing, and that's largely due to external factors such as cost of living crisis, the health and wellness, global factors that are affecting everybody. But I think the industry is under duress.
How does it manifest itself in the glass?
So as ever at the top end, wine quality is, as I said earlier, not in question, and in fact world class. But I think business-wise, everybody, even our very best producers, are finding trading conditions tough.
Yeah, right. Do you think the quality bar has been raised in the last sort of 12 months, or is it sort of plateaued out? Or?
No, I think quality. I think the great wonder of the modern era, roughly from 1994 and free and fair elections, the quality bar goes up and up, and I think our gains now are coming from improvements in the vineyard. I think our producers in the cellar have been very good for a while now, and I think the improvements there are incremental, whereas what we're doing in the vineyards is exponential. Getting better and better at understanding how to farm for quality. Again, like my qualification is at the top end. At the bottom end, we're very proficient, and we've made a lot of gains in terms of being economical and getting bigger and bigger tonnages off existing vineyards, but that doesn't necessarily make for more interesting wine.
Okay, cool. So are producers at the top end taking fewer risks or more?
I think it's not so much about risk-taking, but more about refinement, and I think our top-end wines are getting more and more refined, and there's a growing sophistication, and as we become more confident about where we fit in the world of wine.
Cool. And talking about confidence. Is there more confidence in the South African voice in the industry, or is it more producer specific? Or region specific?
I think we're sort of embracing our diversity without being twee. So there's no, you've got sort of old school Bordeaux blends coming out of Stellenbosch that can easily hold their own against Bordeaux itself and the expensive wines of Napa. And then similarly, you've got sort of cutting edge white blends out of the Swartland or wherever it may be that are sort of almost unique to South Africa in terms of stylistics and flavor profile, but are unquestionably world class.
And over the last 12 months, the new releases you've been tasting, has there been any surprising elements of those wines?
That's a good question.
In a general sense, or even in a specific sense?
It's a good question. I 26 years into this gig, sometimes I feel like nothing's going to surprise me in terms of what's in the bottle. But as I say, the bar keeps going up. I mean, I think that is the continuous improvement, sort of almost unending, is incredibly gratifying. And one would expect things to level out at some point, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
Perfect. Has there been a structural change? I mean, is there a trend towards lighter wines? I mean, that seems to be a given. And has that slowed down? Is it?
No, I think the move towards lighter wines continues apace, and I think that's in line with global trends, where as I say, the health and wellness people are drinking are much more focused about health and not into excessive consumption, and I also think lifestyles are changing. So people are eating more likely, multi-course meals in fancy restaurants are increasingly a thing of the past for the average Joe. So lightness is definitely a trend and will continue to be as far as I can see.
Mm. And do you think stylistically in the glass that the pendulum has swung too far towards that sort of low alcohol?
No, definitely not. I can only see it continuing. I mean,
oh really? Mm.
No and low is off a low base, but is just growing hugely. And so, I think what we're going to see, for those of us who are still into wine, fine wine, where 14.5 alcohol was acceptable, it's going to become increasingly less acceptable. I mean, of course, you've got the UK tax scenario, which also penalises high alcohol. I think, the world's turned against high alcohol wines. The age of Robert Parker is long since over. And, of course, if you're making a very serious Cabernet or a Cabernet blend, you're not going to come to market at 11% alcohol necessarily. And those wines will continue to be made. But in very broad terms, lighter alcohol is definitely going to be with us.
And is there a South African house style of wine emerging, or is it still producer specific?
I would say that there isn't such a thing as a South African house style. Yes, by virtue of our closeness to the equator, i.e. our latitude, our sunshine hours, there's a generosity of fruit, but equally our wine growing areas are so diverse, from Swartland to Elam and everything in between, that you can't really say that there's a universal South African house style.
Mm. Cool. And then over the last 12 months, which varieties had a good year? Which varieties had a bad year? What?
So I mean, Shannon. I think I've said this every SONA for the last 5 or so years. Shannon is such a national treasure, and the diversity of styles that are all more or less legitimate, from light and unoaked through to a later pick, richer style, are all legit, and they're all impressive and have their place, and I think the market is accepting of them, and so Shannon is just fantastic. I mean, is there too much Shannon? That's a perennial question. I always say you don't ask a Burgundian why they make so much Chardonnay or an Austrian why they make so much Grüner Veltliner. We should embrace it. It's our most planted grape. It's I think we're getting a global reputation for making great Chenin, so let's get on with it.
And whites beyond Chenin?
So Sauvignon, just so commercially successful. I think top-end Sauvignon is really smart. I think there's lots of boring Sauvignon, lots and lots of boring Sauvignon out there, but that's what the market wants. So, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Mm-hmm. I think without being glib, we seem to do everything well, and I think there is a appreciation that from producers that there's a place in the sun for everyone depending on what you specialize in. So Chard, there's some excellent Chardonnays. The so-called Rhone varieties offer a lot of excitement in terms of sheer quality. I mean, selling the stuff is they're more niche varieties for sure, and finding your consumer is therefore a little bit more difficult. But there's nothing wrong with the quality. What am I ignoring? I'm Colombard skeptical.
As a fine wine?
As a fine wine. I'm just not sure the variety has the intrinsics to deliver sufficient complexity. And I think it's our third most planted variety after Chenin and Sauvignon. And of course it was planted for distilling purposes. But there are a few producers now who are trying to make a go of it, and in some instances charging quite cheeky prices. And I'm not signing off on this for now. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I haven't tasted any Colombard yet that really gets me excited.
And on the red side of things, where does Cabernet Sauvignon now sit in the hierarchy?
So I think Stellenbosch is always, and Cab have always been synonymous, but I think we're seeing some of our best Stellenbosch producers investing in it financially, and I mean in the sense of planting virus-free vineyards, and emotionally in the sense of really getting to drilling down on what the best expression of the variety can be relative to their international competitors. So Stellenbosch Cab, I think, is tracking in the right direction. My caveat there would be climate change, and I think climate change is sort of becomes more and more dramatically evident with each passing year. I mean, of course, the 23s are now hitting the market, and of course that was rain affected and sort of late summer rains, which is unusual. And how much is that going to compromise Cabernet going forward? I think we should all be nervous about it. We've got these very dry seasons followed by very wet seasons, and late ripening variety like Cab's going to potentially be very compromised. So that's a point of concern, I think. Cabernet beyond Stellenbosch, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think Stellenbosch pretty much owns the category.
Okay. In previous episodes of this podcast, you've lauded Syrah. Is that still continuing unabated, more so?
Very much. I mean, it's a super exciting category. Some of them, I would say, to my palate, the most exciting red wine category in the country. The curious thing for me is that, by all accounts, difficult to sell, i.e. doesn't have a big commercial following, and that bemuses me, quite frankly.
Locally or internationally, or both?
Both, as I understand. Okay. I always chuckle. This is my theory, is that some consumers find it too peppery, and for me that's the whole point of Syrah. So it's almost like it's got too much character, Famously, Merlot is the most successful single varietal category in the country, and I think that's because it's so insipid and offensive.
So when the fish stew is a bit too fishy,
kind of thing. Don't give me. Famously, why is that a white Toyota Corolla one of the biggest selling cars? Because it doesn't offend anybody. And maybe Syrahs are just too challenging for the, it's certainly not middle of the road. Our best Syrahs are provocative, thought-provoking, compelling wines, and the producers who are working with it tend to be, are not afraid to push the boat out. What I mean by that, a degree of whole bunch, if not 100% whole bunch, earlier picks. They're wines, they aren't beginner wines.
Yeah, right, okay. And so would you say the top red wines in the country are mostly Syrah?
It's a bit of a sweeping statement, but a short answer, yes.
Yeah, okay. Pinotage, the bad boy of South African red varieties. We had a conversation recently with Aubrey Beersler, which was very interesting. What's your take on the state of Pinotage?
The bad boy of South African wine. It's certainly the most controversial grape, and always has been and remains so. It's always going to be with us. It's not like whether the world likes it or not. It has established itself, and I think we're at a tipping point in the sense of trying to free it from its historical baggage and really unlocking its potential. I think we need to see greater diversity of styles. And it's kind of got a bit stylistically trapped, which is not to say it's typically made in a later pick, heavily extracted, heavily oak style, which is I have no problem with when it's done well. But I think it doesn't do the grape or the category any good to only make it in that style. I would like to see a greater spread of styles, and I mean I think Shannon's a very useful reference in that regard. That there's a huge spectrum of styles that are suitable for different drinking occasions, and for me it would be really useful for Pinotage as a category to see greater stylistic diversity.
Yeah, for me it's more like acceptance that quality can exist in different styles, and that seems to be a bit of a roadblock in the industry at the moment. The guys who want big heavy wines only think that good Pinotage is made that way, and vice versa. The guys who want light, fresh, aromatic, elegant wines only think that that is the keys to quality, whereas style and quality are two different things, and I think you can have quality in different stylistic frameworks.
Very well put. I mean, stylistic style and quality aren't the same thing at all, and yet I think both producers and loyal Pinotage consumers are obsessed with a very particular iteration of Pinotage, mysterious concept. I mean, I gave up on suggesting drinking windows some time ago because it's a mug's game. You look at a wine in its youth and you go, well, it's very structured and in the sense of like having great big tannins, and and then 5 years down the line it's fallen over because it was overdone and the pH was too high, and then some. It constantly surprises me which ones age and which ones don't. So I guess what I'm saying is bigness doesn't equal age-worthy, but similarly, lightness doesn't equal age-worthy either.
All right. Well, let's split the question into two different questions. Is there still a place for big wines, balanced wines?
I think so, very much so, and it's all about drinking occasion. I mean, I don't want to drink necessarily 11% Cinsault with my 600-gram T-bone. Similarly, I don't want to drink 14.9% Cabernet with my, Boerewors roll on a 35-degree Celsius summer day.
And is there still a place for age-worthy reds?
I think so. So again, who ages their wine anymore? You need to have a cellar, or you need to have a budget to fill the cellar. But equally, I think the mark of greatness remains wines that age, and hence why Kanonkorp is Kanonkorp, because those of us highly involved in wine, when you get to drink 20, 30-year-old Paul Sour, it can be absolutely mind-blowing. And that goes towards the pedigree of the farm. Not all of us are putting corks on a 30-year-old Paul Sour all that often, but when you do, it's amazing. And that, as I say, goes towards pedigree.
Moving on to sort of terroir and regional differences, if they exist. Is terroir visible in the glass? Is regional identities becoming clearer?
I think very much so, and I think that goes towards your earlier question about where's South Africa at in 2026. The better we get at viticulture, the more clear the regional differences are, and not just regional. We in some instances we're getting down to differences of vineyard, and in that respect, I don't mean to highlight Polka Dry over any other reason, but it's absolutely fascinating to see how Polka Dry Hills has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years as a centre of excellence, and then one farm in particular, Karabib, where some of our really best Syrah, amongst other varieties, is emerging. And then down to a particular vineyard that 1 or 2 or 3 growers get the grapes from, and then it's rows within that vineyard that produce different wines. I mean, that's, we're talking kind of Grand Cru Burgundy kind of, I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're heading in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Tasting highlights of last year, personal tasting highlights?
I don't necessarily want to name all the usual suspects. Our top producers remain have become clear in the last
clearer.
Clearer. Yeah. Yes, I will name them. I mean, it's Saadi, it's Malinu, it's Van Lochenberg, it's Raal. Kanonkorp is definitely, remains relevant and in the mix, and hats off to Kanonkorp because they've done it for bloody decades, whereas all those other producers are fairly recent arrivals on the scene. Well,
they're all first generation, aren't they, from the list?
Indeed, and going off on a little bit of a tangent. They're first generation, but they're not necessarily youngsters anymore. So I think a fascinating scenario that is emerging is succession. What happens to these first generation producers when they reach retirement age, which is not terribly far away for some of them. We're not on the brink of that yet, but it's going to start playing out. If Evan Saadi is in his 50s, the Malinus must be in their late 40s, Adi Barnos is in his 50s, Luki must be early 40s, Lucas van Lochenberg. So they're not kids anymore. They're not just starting out. And so who are they going to hand over the baton to?
Good question. Any particular producers who made big strides in 2025 that you see?
So my answer to that is there's still an extraordinary flood of new entrants that are on. There's a sort of a sass about them, and sometimes a sass as well. They just arrive on the scene making really, really good wine, and so the constant.
You have a couple of names out of that.
So, I think Angus Paul is the first name that comes to mind. I mean, he's been bubbling under, but I was really impressed with his new set of releases. Early 30s, Alex McFarlane, Banele. I mean, he was Duncan Savage's understudy for a long while. He's now gone on his own. and he seems to have a really smart aesthetic. Makes a Shannon and a Syrah. As I say, it's a constant stream. My concern is they're typically quite bullish about what they can charge for their wines.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how much of a market segment's going to lap up wines at sort of $350 around a bottle plus, with no track record and no brand equity.
Are they all chasing the same very small niche market?
Precisely. I mean, you would know as head of Animo. I mean, where does all this stuff go? And are we relying on the season, i.e., December, January, February, when the tourists arrive with their euros and pounds and dollars? That seems like a fragile business model to me.
What do you think is the most underappreciated region or style in South Africa? So, if international visitors coming to South Africa, you've got one wine to show them to surprise them, and their wine knowledge is good. And then
that's a great question. My answer to that would be that there's so much going on, and it's so diverse. There's Stompie Meyer, who's like pioneering the Piquet Boerberg, which is 2 hours outside Cape Town on top of a bloody mountain, in the Swartland, but sort of Elgin-esque kind of climate conditions, making wines in an almost unprecedented style, unprecedented in a South African context. He's got Chard and Pinot planted side by side with Grenache and Mourvedre. It's bonkers, but so cool. And so if you're fresh off the plane from London or New York or Tokyo, there's just come with an open mind and explore. And it's not like arriving in Piedmont and you're only going to drink Barolo, or arriving in Burgundy and you're only going to drink Pinot. It's wild what's going on. So it's still a great sense of experimentation and adventure, and it's super exciting. So, as I say,
it still feels like the Wild West.
It still feels like, very much so, and if anything, it's getting more crazy, and as producers trust their instincts more and are less sort of market driven. It's super cool.
Just to turn the magnifying glass on yourself, how is wine criticism or wine commentary evolving? Or is it not? Is that the problem?
No. I think my answer to that would be, I don't want to talk myself out of a job, but I think wine criticism is dying, which is not to say wine commentary is dying. Once the wine bites, I think wine enthusiasts simply can't get enough of it, whether it be get enough wine content. My instinct is scores are dying, because there's no room in the market for mediocre wine. If you're making sub 90 point wine, whether it's a Christian Eedes 90 point or a Tim Atkin 90 point or a Platters 90 point, you might as well close up shop. There's simply the market won't tolerate
too much other choice.
Too much other choice. So nobody's making really bad wine anymore. And again, whereas circa 20 years ago, there was a lack of sophistication and know-how. Those days are gone. I mean, everybody is well-traveled, properly educated in the sense of having done all the necessary qualifications and making technically very sound wine. There are very few poor wines. I mean, yes, Brett raises its ugly head now and again, but it's not nowhere near as bad as it was. Not just Brett, VA, oxidation.
So virtually everyone's going to pass a proficiency test.
Precisely.
And so they can actually put some art in there rather than...
So back to your question about about criticism, you know, I mean, criticism's redundant. You know, now it becomes, do I like this style or that style? And on that note, that's where I think commentary, I'm making quite a fine distinction here, but I have seen evidence where the wine insiders are crazy about Syrah X or Syrah Y because it's so edgy, and then your aspirational consumer or your fashion-driven consumer wants to acquire the wine and then realizes that they don't actually like it because it's so, you know, left field. And so that's where I think commentary's still got a big role. But, you know, whether it's a 97 or a 96 or a 98, who gives a crap?
Yeah, right. Okay, so you have to draw the stylistic map.
Precisely.
Okay. I asked you to have a look and see what the top viewed articles or interacted articles.
Yeah, always interesting.
Always interesting. Is it still the Malva pudding recipe, or?
Yeah. So a year or two ago, top of the list was the Malva pudding recipe, and I think your famous chirp was we should be cooking.co.za or pudding.co.za.
Yeah, baking.
And I did think about that until I simply took the article down because it was skewing our analytics so badly.
It was too successful.
Yes, too successful. So I didn't want to become pudding.co.za.
Yeah. It was too big; it had to fail.
So I'm happy to report that Malva pudding, it wasn't the top most visited page in the website. Sadly, out of the top 5, 2 of them were death notices.
Oh, shame.
Yeah, so Dani Statler of Kaapstad passed away last year, as did Achim van Arnhem, and those were both highly read posts. Achim van Arnhem of Haute Cabrera. But then I'm happy to report that there were 2 op-ed pieces, one by Michael Fridgen, entitled Cape Wine's Vanishing Middle and the Struggle for Survival, and one by myself entitled The Great Divide, Cape Town versus Joburg Market Realities. And I think that is both those, the fact that those 2 articles feature is one, interesting, and 2, gratifying in that they were, you know, deep dive thought leader pieces.
It's not necessarily 98 and 90 points, click here.
Precisely. And yeah, just to maybe elaborate a little bit, the vanishing middle, Michael's piece was about the fact that, you know, our very top producers are doing okay, and then our entry-level / bulk producers are also doing okay. But if you're selling Merlot at 180 rand a bottle, it's probably pretty tough out there. I'm oversimplifying, but I mean that's the gist of the article.
Yeah, I'll put the link to all those articles in the comments.
And then similarly, my article about Cape Town versus Joburg was that undoubtedly Joburg is a really important market for SA wine, but the wine culture, I use the term advisedly, is not where it should be, but conversely, I think Joburg's serviced by the industry as a whole, because it's hard work and it's unglamorous. It's easier, but it's more fun to get on a plane and go and sell your wine in London than it is to go and sell your wine in Bracktown. And I think that's a crucial issue that we should be collectively as an industry engaging with and focusing on. There's well documented that is a growing middle class.
Well, especially as exports are shrinking, then surely content will become much more important.
100%. I mean, and exports are shrinking dramatically. Dramatically. Is that fair? I mean, but exports have always left something to be desired in my mind, and I'm talking in very macro terms, and they certainly aren't getting any better given the state of the world. Ongoing war in Ukraine, Trump's batshit crazy foreign policies, etc., etc. So it's not boom times. So yeah, to your point, Johannesburg's on our doorstep for the industry. It's a 2-hour flight away, so get on with it. In the top 5, just before we think cooking.co.za is not an option, was the boerewors recipe. I might have to put that. I might have to take that down as well.
Who wrote that one?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was Anna Trapida, who was our food correspondent for a long while. Well, yeah. Restaurant critic. It's still restaurant reviews never caught on, much to my surprise. Speaking from an editorial point of view, because wine and food go hand in hand, if you ask me.
Yes.
But nobody ever came to the website to read our restaurant reviews.
From a macro point of view, what would you like to see winemakers and viticulturists do more of and less of going forward?
A slightly indirect answer would be, I think marketing is what lets the South African wine industry down. And I think there are various reasons for that. And one is that the margins are so tight in wine that nobody invests in marketing. But equally, I think there's an element of laziness. Marketing doesn't need to cost a fortune, I don't think. In this day and age, I'm still bemused at, for instance, how poor a lot of social media is. That doesn't cost a lot, and it doesn't require great expertise or intellect. Just get on with it. Just push some content out there, and tell people that you exist. Look, it's not as simple as that, for sure. But I think our marketing efforts leave a lot to be desired.
Individually or collectively or both?
Both.
Okay.
So from your boutique startups all the way through to how we market South African wine generically. And yes, I would, everybody beats up on Woza, but I do think Woza could do a better job. Very much hamstrung by a lack of budget, but again, I don't think budget, you can blame everything on budget. The ingenuity needs to be brought to bear, and I'm not sure we think enough about that. And I think, and there's a historical legacy issue here, but bulk wine features far more, we don't add enough value, so still in 2026, there are producers farming for volume rather than value, if you will, or rather than quality. Everything should be about adding value and towards charging a premium.
But if they're making money, then...
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
If they can afford a new double cab at the end of the year, then they think they're doing all right.
Yeah. One thing I didn't actually mention, which I did want to ask you about, was Cape Wine 2025, which is a triennial. I get them confused. Once every 3 years, not 3 times a year. Conference organised by Wines of South Africa / Woza. You attended it. What were your experiences?
So by all accounts, it was successful, and kudos to the organisers. But, and there is a but, it was held at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, as it has always been. And again, where was the innovation? Where was the activation, the game-changing activation? Because it's competitive out there, and South Africa owns all the media space for a good long while, by virtue of making such exciting wines and being such a vibrant industry. But by all accounts, I think that's starting to slip. The media is always looking for a new story. And, are we, as an industry, are we as top of mind as we could and should be. And I think that's a moot point, and we should be constantly having that conversation. How do we stay relevant in a very, very competitive world? And so back to Cape Wine, was it as by all accounts, deals got done, and it was. But to my mind, it felt a little bit like business as usual, which is not good enough to, in a fast-changing, very competitive world.
Your advice would be to unashamedly pursue quality as the differentiating factor.
Well, I can't see, and I don't want to be simplistic, but I can't see it any other way. I mean, again, if you look at the alcohol category in its entirety, it's under huge pressure. I think we're at a pivotal moment where tobacco was maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. There are very strong movements at play that says alcohol isn't the smartest thing to consume. And some of them are driven by well-meaning and informed medical opinion. Some of it's agenda-driven, like the rise of cannabis. Who's actually behind that? Who's actually funding it? So, again, a mediocre wine product, you're going to get steamrolled. You've got to put really good booze in the bottle, and then you've got to package it. In the broadest sense, with a really good story, really good branding.
Just to get in the room.
Just to get in the room. Otherwise, people are going to be drinking craft gin if they drink at all. And if they're not drinking, they're going to be chewing a gummy. And if they're not chewing a gummy, they're probably mountain biking or
Heaven forbid. We all need less cyclists on the road.
Indeed. Calm down and pour yourself a glass. A
glass of Chenin Blanc can be exhilarating too.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. But maybe combine both. That would be the sensible advice. That's what my doctor would say.
If the trends are towards sort of lighter reds generally, how are varieties like Cinsault or Pinot Noir, sort of naturally lighter varieties? How are they are they filling that gap, or is it?
Very much so. Broadly speaking, I think there are 4 varieties that are well suited to the light red trend. Those being, in no particular order, Grenache, Cinsault, Pinot, and New Wave Syrah.
Not the Taj.
That's the huge missed opportunity, because missed opportunity? It's a very nascent phenomenon that I think there are some very exciting lighter style pinotages, lower alcohol, more red fruited rather than black fruited, more fragrance rather than more grape based fragrance than oak based fragrance, aromatic should I say. It's been traditional for me to beat up on Pinot and Pinot Tax in particular, but I'm happy to report that I think finally our Pinots are at least respectable, if not yet great. And that's been a very, very recent development. Peter Allen Finlayson of Cristallin.
With the 24 vintage, I'm assuming?
No, I don't think it's so much vintage driven. I think it needed a lot of refinement.
Because the 23 obviously was very rain affected also.
I think notoriously difficult grape to work with, but I think what's happened is it lagged behind the industry in terms of excellence. It's taken our best producers that much longer. Our best producers who specialize in Pinot that much longer to really work out what they want to do with the grape. I'm still not completely convinced that our Pinots deserve their price points, and I think, but there's an infatuation with the category that they sell anyway, infatuation amongst consumers. So good luck to you if you're selling your Pinot at sort of 750 rand a bottle. Cinsault is probably a better buy in terms of quality relative to price, because it's got a historical legacy of being something of a workhorse grape, so it possibly doesn't fetch quite the same price as Pinot. So if you're looking for a lighter red, I think Cinsault typically delivers. Grenache for me, I was super excited about it. We seem to have reached a little bit of a impasse in terms of quality improvement, and famously, its age of vines has got a lot to do with that. And a lot of our plantings are very young. I'm not sure that explains everything.
So there's a clear quality differential between young vine and old vine Grenache in your mind.
I think that's part of the conversation for sure. Is it the entire conversation? I'm not sure. We've tend, it's curious in my mind is that Priorat, Southern Rhone, Grenache can be a very powerful wine, and then South Africa tends to make it in this very light, almost ethereal style. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but
that's a clonal thing. I mean, the historical clone here was a workhorse clone. It was a big, very thin-skinned.
For sure.
And now the new clones, well, new to South Africa, clones are in here, which are much tighter, smaller bunches, smaller berry size, so much more skin to juice ratio. So that will change, I think,
for sure,
fairly quickly.
Well, hopefully. To put it succinctly, I think there's lots of nice Grenache, but I'm not sure there's any great Grenache.
Would you say the same thing about Cinsault then, or is there great Cinsault out there? Is Cinsault
so I think
capable?
A moot question. It's a bit like what Colombard is to white varieties. You could argue Cinsault is to red varieties. I think Cinsault has got the advantage of, in many instances, older vineyards. Virus compromised older vineyards, but nevertheless older vineyards. What Melanie is doing with their Wellington vineyard, what Van Lochenberg is doing with the Luther Franschhoek vineyard. You have very, very smart winemakers working with older vineyards, and those Cinsauts are very captivating, very compelling. Yeah, so I think Cinsauts in a really good space.
Cool. I mean, I don't want to end on a negative, but there is a bit of an elephant in the room in terms of stock piling up in the industry. Do you feel that from your end, or?
I've never felt such a general mood of doom and gloom is putting it strongly, but there's a real sense of
is pessimism too strong a word?
Possibly not. Very difficult trading conditions. As we go into 2026 harvest, the whole wineland seems to be on fire. It just seems to be travail after travail, and I think that wears people down, wears producers down, and quite understandably. I mean, everybody's talking about how big an issue smoke taint's going to be in 2026. There's no getting around that. How much of the crop is going to be compromised? So as you say, not nice to end on such a bleak note, but it's undeniable. And I think, but
there are a lot of positives, but that's sort of very recent and very.
When the going gets tough, the tough get going, and the industry is remarkably resilient. And we should also remember that there've been a lot of one's outlook shouldn't be too short term. We've come a hell of a long way since 1994, and that sense of, as I say, resilience and. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Similarly, a Boer market plan. It's time to make some plans.
So, is it going to be a bit of a Darwinian era in terms of the strong will survive?
I think you can see signs of industry contraction. It's not theoretical or hypothetical. I think there are a lot of players dropping out, and so yes. Well, it's been happening for a good long while, but I think it's going to it's going to speed up in the short term. You know, vineyards are going to be grubbed up or simply abandoned. And similarly, you know, to go back to those kids starting out with stars in their eyes, charging 350, 400 rand a bottle, can't see how they're going to make it, which sounds depressing and pessimistic, but you know, we can't ignore the business realities.
Cool. Well, it's a bit of a somber note to finish up this year's SONA, but thank you very much, Christian. Always good to get your opinion and your hot takes. Yeah, have a great year, and I'm sure we'll hear from you soon.
Thanks, David. Lekker to do it.